As the Northern Ireland Assembly.
Okay, members, welcome to this morning's meeting. We now have a quorum, so we can get started. In the room with me today, I have Andy Allen and Paul Frew, and on Starleaf we have Anya Murphy and Stephen Dunn. So I'm going to then start and ask members if they have any declaration of interest. Can they please let us know either now or through the meeting? Stephen Dunn? Bring Stephen in. Good. Or he had his hand up. He's put his hand down again. Sorry. Playing around with that button again today. Okay, I'm going to move on then to...
Oh, he is wanting to speak, I think.
Oh, he does? Right, bring Stephen in. Oh, he's dropped off.
He's still there, I can see him.
We can see him on the screen. Sorry, Stephen. Bear with us. There, no.
Yeah, thanks.
Go ahead, Stephen.
I wasn't allowed to unmute myself there. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, private landlord.
Okay, no problem, thank you. And then can I also welcome Aisling Riley to the meeting, who's joined us as well. It's good to have you here. Then I'm going to move on to, Kelly will be slightly late, but she will be here, just under apologies as well. I'm going to move on to agenda item 2, which is Chairperson's business. Members, yesterday the Chartered Institute of Housing held an All-Ireland Summit. I was supposed to chair it on behalf of the committee yesterday morning, a piece in the morning, but because of Assembly business I was unable to attend, though there was some quite worrying and disturbing facts that came out of that meeting, and very much to do with the 3-year resource budget in reduction to the housing executive, which 3-year resource budget, which in reality is a year-on-year reduction that they're facing. Also was mentioned about there may be problems then ahead when it comes to social housing and in the new build programme. Because of the budget, and they also had mentioned, or Grania Long had also mentioned about when the COVID funding stops for the homelessness piece that they're doing, and a part of their homelessness strategy as well, that in real terms means that there are 900 temporary accommodation places that will not be funded, and I know from figures yesterday they'd only had something like 12 places free across their entire temporary accommodation yesterday. So I think that is really very, very concerning for us as a committee. I just would ask the committee if they would be in agreement that we ask the Housing Executive to come in and brief us. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, Chair, I'd be absolutely in support of that, but could we also ask the department, the housing branch, to come in and brief us as to what their forecast, obviously I know the budget's a draft form, but to get a forecast from them as to where they are, and also in the context of the Minister's housing supply strategy, or her ambitious strategy as to how they believe they're going to achieve that.
Yeah, because it certainly doesn't appear to be enough money in the budget to make a dent on that, from what I can gather. So members agreed then we'll both of those actions, yeah? Okay. Secondly, on Chairperson's business, I know, Andy, that you were there for part of it last night. We had our Young Persons event to do with our gambling bill. Really very good event. The young people really did engage. They, as per usual, as with the licensing bill, they gave us some food for thought. And in particular, the lack of education. They're taught to a certain degree around addiction to drugs, cigarettes, alcohol, but gambling doesn't seem to be part of that teaching whenever they're at school. So they did come up with some very good ideas. It was quite surprising on their views about even extending opening hours. They weren't necessarily in favour of that. And they were very, very wise around the whole subject of addiction. So I know that there will be a piece drawn up from that last night. It was a good meeting. It started at 6:30 and it didn't end until almost 9 o'clock last night. So we got into some really good conversations as the night went on. So, and a big thank you to the education team here in the Assembly as well for facilitating that also. But that will follow. When will we get that, Janice?
Well, obviously we're doing our report for the end of next week, so we'll be sorting it out with them in the next couple of days.
So we'll find that in the committee report there might be some recommendations then in our report that will have come from our Young Persons event last night. So as always, it certainly is very worthwhile. So I want to thank them and put that on the record. I'll move on then to agenda item 3, which is draft minutes. Members, you'll find the draft minutes of the meeting of the 13th of January 2022 at page 6 of your packs. Are members content to agree the minutes as drafted?
Agreed.
Agreed. Good stuff. Thank you. Okay, members, we're going to move to agenda item 4, which is committee deliberations on the betting, gaming, lotteries and amusements amendment bill. Members of the committee will now continue its deliberations on this bill. And just to remind you again that this is not the formal clause-by-clause stage. We're continuing today to go through the clauses and comprehensively review with the department any issues raised by stakeholders or committee members, and to ask for clarification on how the bill addresses these concerns and any additional action that the department intends to take on the back of the evidence the committee has received. Members, you've been provided in your papers with information on this. It starts at page 23 with a copy of the bill, a copy of the 1985 orders at page 55. Departmental replies to the committee queries so far start at page 222, and the evidence summary tables start at 277. As always, Claire McCanny from the Bill Office is following proceedings today and will be available at the end of the meeting should members wish to discuss, if I could speak, options if the committee want to put down any amendments. Members will hopefully devote around 2 hours to deliberations now, and if we have time and need to, we'll come back to the deliberations at the end of the meeting. Can I also remind members that questions or comments should be focused on the specific clause under discussion, and then I'll just ask our members in agreement to proceed. Agreed? Yes? Okay. Then can I welcome Kieran May and Martina Campbell, please, to the meeting. Hello.
Good morning,
Good
Sarah.
morning.
Good morning.
Good to have you here with us again.
Morning.
Thank
yes.
you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to get started then with clause 1, which is interpretations. Members, we have no queries have been raised on this, or interpretation, no queries have been raised on this to date. Again, ask members, have they any comments on clause 1? No comments on clause 1. We'll move on to clause 2, opening of licensed offices on Sunday and Good Friday. At the meeting on Tuesday, the officials went through the response to the committee queries to date. Members seemed content with the responses and no further queries were raised. Can I ask again, members, have you any further comments you wish to make on Sunday and Good Friday? Stephen, you have your hand up. You're muted, Stephen.
Oh, yes, sorry, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I would just like to register with a few concerns in relation to clause 2. Particularly, I suppose, around the theme of, not taking on board public health advice. I think we've seen over the last 2 years to go down that road would be quite a dangerous road to go down in terms of the ongoing pandemic, I suppose, and it is certainly noteworthy that the Institute of Public Health and their written evidence, how they highlighted the health element to it, and I would just like to register those concerns, as well as the feedback from the Gambling with Lives and GamCare, and of course the Old Party Group and other charities. I know from speaking to an employee recently in my office here, just actually about he works for a well-known bookmaker in North Down, and he was he raised the query with me about the Sunday opening and so on. He was coming from the point of view of family life, and he was very much opposed to further opening hours, not for any moral reasons or any other reason like that. It was purely to spend time with his family. So I just wanted to register those concerns, and I think it's certainly worth noting. I certainly would not comfortable with clause 2 as it currently stands.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Stephen, and we'll register those concerns. Paul?
Yeah, and just to add to that, what Stephen says, the evidence we'd received from the Institute of Public Health and the Public Health Agency, and their concerns around it also.
Okay, thank you for that. Any other members, any other comments on that? No? Okay. Mark Durkin, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. It's just supposed to point out the fact that when we aren't being disrespectful about or disregarding the opinion of those agencies that have been named vis-a-vis their concerns around the Sunday opening. If we were to ask them for an opinion, they would say close bookmakers altogether. let's say, close bars altogether. Let's say, that is their view, and I think we're right, certainly, to acknowledge it, but we can't make policy based purely on the view of agencies as such.
Okay, no, thank you for that, Mark. It was also interesting last night with the young people, and albeit it was a very, very small sample there, but they were, the majority of them were of the opinion as well as to why we needed to extend the hours given the problem given problem gambling in Northern Ireland, which which the young people actually had said during our meeting last night as well. Kieran or Martina, anything you want to make comment on that?
Thanks, Chair. Certainly we note the comments about from the various agencies, and as Mark has just said, I think they adopt a very, sometimes can come from a very risk-averse position. And it's important to remember that the vast majority of people who gamble do so responsibly and enjoy it as a form of entertainment. So, and also, as I think it was Paul pointed out, that sometimes it's better to keep the gambler in the one place, in the bookies, where the staff can, generally the staff will know them and can look after them and help them if they think that they are developing a problem. And the other point that I wanted to make is that in the other jurisdictions where opening has been available for many years, it hasn't necessarily led to an increase in problem gambling. The issue is, as we all know, the fact that online gambling is available 24 hours a day. And in response to Stephen's point about right to family life, I think Paul had also raised that a number of times. And all we would point to is the protections that we are including within the bill by extending workers' rights to not have to work on a Sunday. And we also, during the evidence sessions, we did hear from the Turf Guardians Association, who indicated that their members would be respectful of anyone who didn't want to work on a Sunday for whatever reason. So that's my comments on that, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Martina. Any other comments from members, or can we move on then? We've already touched on this already, but it's clause 3 then, is Sunday working in a licensed office. At the meeting on Tuesday, officials went through their responses to the committee queries to date. We highlighted evidence we had received that any additional opportunities for gambling had the potential to increase gambling-related harm and impact on family life. Otherwise, no queries were raised. Members, I know we've already touched on this when we were talking about clause 2. Is there anything further members want to add to that? Clause 3, Sunday working? No, and I think, Martina, you've answered that as well in your first one. I'm happy with that, unless you want to add anything further. Sorry, Andy wants to comment.
Sure. It's just back, and I know we've been private tenancies and licensing is we've been very keen on guidance. I know quite often employment law is very complex, so just the need for guidance as to the employment safeguards that do exist in respect to those who may not wish to work on a Sunday.
Okay, thanks, Andy. Martina?
Certainly we can take that away and look at it. It probably would be for colleagues, I think, in Department for Economies, but we'll certainly work with them. We did work with them in getting their agreement to extend the protections for betting shop workers, so that's not a problem. We can do that. We can look at that.
Okay, thank you. Members agreed then? We move on to clause 4? Yep. Okay, clause 4 is pool betting. No issues or queries were raised on this to date. Members, any comments on the pool betting? No comments. Martina, any comments on that, or will I move on? No?
Yeah, you can move on. Yes,
Grand,
thank you, Chair.
Move then to clause 5, persons who may participate in bingo at a bingo club. Again, we raise no queries on this either. Members, any comments they want to raise in clause 5 at this stage? No, nobody's raising their hand. Again, Martina, anything further on that, or happy to move on?
Happy to move on, thank
Good
you.
stuff. We'll move on to clause 6 then, days when bingo and use of gaming machines permitted on bingo club premises. At the meeting on Tuesday, the officials went through their responses to the committee queries to date and highlighted that they have had, I have no glasses with me today at all, that they had expected to have returns from the Northern Ireland Court Service, and now, however, these had not yet been received. Officials confirmed that they were working with the courts to get through the information and would continue to do so. A member queried the illegal gaming machines in, for example, fast food outlets and the powers of the PSNI in that regard. Officials highlighted that there were sufficient powers for the PSNI and that there were a number of offences. One, an offence by the outlet owner for having the machine, and two, the offence by the supplier of the machine. The member then suggested that the issue may lie with the PSNI awareness and or use of its powers. After the meeting on Tuesday, we wrote to the department on the following issues, requesting the returns from the court service and further information on how the department will work with the court service on data gathering, and we requested that the department respond on how they intend to highlight to the PSNI its powers in this regard and provide information on how it is using these powers. Okay, Martina, is there anything further you want to inform us, or any more information on any of that?
Yes, certainly, Chair. We've sent through some information. It may not just have reached you yet. So we've provided you with the response we've received from the court service so far. That's obviously not the final version, and we'll send the final version as soon as all the returns are in. As I said previously, court service have confirmed they're willing to work with us to see what more information they can provide us. And I think I'd said that the one piece of information that the courts don't seem to collect that they might be able to do is the number, where they specify the number of gaming machines permitted when they're issuing a licence. And we don't think that this would be very onerous for them to collate that information. We don't believe there's any need to amend or insert any additional clauses to allow us to do that. On, on the issue about the illegal gaming machines in fast food depots, you had asked, or Mark had asked, about whether or not the police were aware of the powers and whether or not they used them. So we did contact our contact in PSNI that for gambling purposes, and he confirmed that police do not routinely check for this type of offence. That said, if anyone is aware of gaming machines being used in premises where they are not permitted, it should be reported to the police. And then we just did a Google search and we come up with 3 different examples of where the police had obviously undertaken a targeted operation in relation to takeaways and fast food. And we've provided links to those for you in our written response. That's it, Chair.
That's great, thank you, Martina.
Chair, that written response isn't with us yet. It's in the system somewhere probably, but not with us yet.
Janice is just saying that response is not with us yet. Okay.
Yes, sorry, I think I did allude to that. It's on its way.
Grand, okay, Martina, thank you. Okay, members, any comments or queries? Janice, my screen's gone off. There, we're back on. Any comments or queries anybody have on that? Are we happy to move on, Paul?
Just to say by extension, my concerns around clause 2 are the same for clause 6, albeit I know that bingo was much more of a social event, much smaller stakes, and then the game's formatted in a way that's a communal game, and it's a different nature from betting in a bookies. There's no doubt about that. But again, it's providing more access. So whilst I'm not as concerned as clause 2, it's still there. You know that my concern's still there for clause 6.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Anybody, any then further comment on clause 6 at this stage? Nope, nobody's indicating. Okay, then I'll move on to clause 7. Offence of inviting etc. persons under 18 to play gaming machines. At the meeting on Tuesday, the officials went through the responses to the committee queries. To date, officials highlighted the differences in gaming machines in that those based on skill rather than chance are not covered in the 1985 order, and it is hoped in the future to bring these older machines into law. A member requested further clarification on the law in relation to fob teas, and officials clarified that and also highlighted to committee that they had hoped to include fob teas in the bill, but were advised against it by OLC, and that fob teas would be dealt with in the second phase of reforms. A member queried if anything could be done in the Code of Practice. Officials confirmed that in the meantime, fob teas are covered in the draft Code of Practice. After the meeting on Tuesday, we wrote again to the Department on the following issues: that we requested confirmation on the future plans for legislating for older skill-based gaming machines. We requested written confirmation that fob teas will be dealt with in Phase 2 reforms and included in the Code of Practice for now. And we acknowledged that there are also those venues who adequately display notices regarding age suitability of machines, but supported amending the Code of Practice to require notice to be displayed on the gaming machines, and if not possible, as close to the machine as possible. Again, Martina, any further information on that?
Yes, so the department confirms, subject to the views of an incoming minister and executive, that the proposed Phase 2 reforms will include a completely new act which will take account of any proposals arising in other jurisdictions from their reviews. For example, the review of the Gambling Act in England and the ongoing work in the South to introduce a gambling regulator and further reform its own gambling legislation.
Okay.
As the minister, sorry, Chair.
Go ahead, Martina.
As the minister stated during the second stage debate, the scale of reform needed here is enormous and can't be overestimated. The current Gambling Act in Britain has 365 clauses, and even it is considered to be vastly out of date. So we anticipate that we will be bringing forward, obviously subject to the caveats of incoming minister and executive, the single biggest ever piece of legislation that the Assembly has ever dealt with since its inception. So lucky you guys on committee. In bringing forward this legislation in Phase 2, the policy intention is that we will be making provisions for all types of gaming machines, including fixed odds betting terminals, and that will make it clear which machines are permitted, where they are permitted, how many are permitted, and in which location or premise. FOBTs are classified as B3 machines in Britain, and I've sent you through the tables I referred to with the list of different machines, their stakes and prizes. So as I'd said on Tuesday, there's about 8 or 9 different categories of machines in England. And I've sent that, as I said, I've sent that through. So I hope that addresses the point raised by Paul in respect of gaming machines being treated differently here. And then FOBTs are mentioned in the draft Code of Practice within the section on gaming machines on page 28. And we will consider whether or not there are any additional measures we can include within the code on FOBTs, taking into account any points raised by the committee. The committee will also wish to note that legal advice continues to support our view that FOBTs are gaming machines for the purposes of the 85 order. Therefore, they are covered by the order. Ultimately, obviously, that would need the courts to confirm this understanding. And it should be noted, as pointed out by the Chair, that most gaming machines, particularly newer machines, already carry age limit notices on them. And indeed, there's also pop-ups inbuilt within the machine's software, which invites the player to set time limits as well as spending limits. And these pop-ups appear on as soon as they sort of turn the machine on, and then at regular intervals thereafter. In relation to any machines such as grab machines, which are based on skill and not therefore currently covered by the 85 order, it would be difficult to include these machines within the 85 order, as they're not recognised as gambling. They're about testing skill. However, subject to the views of an incoming minister and executive in phase 2, we could include proposals to bring these machines firmly within the remit of the new legislation. And finally, Chair, we confirm that the Code of Practice will be amended to include a requirement to require a notice to be displayed on the actual gaming machine as far as possible on the machine itself. But if, owing to the design of the machine, that's not possible, as close to the machine where it is visible to the user as is possible. That's it, Chair.
Thank you, Martina. Again, we had our event last night with our young people, and at least one, maybe more than one, had said that him and his friends had actually went into an over 18s gaming facility. We're not stopped, we're not asked for ID, we're quite able and quite free to go and play the machines. So they had felt that it wasn't really, they weren't, there was no, they weren't being stopped, so they were quite free. Young people are quite free to do this, and we needed to look at that, whether it's that people should be asked for ID or whatever the case might be. And also then around the signage on machines, again, the young people had said they think that would be a good idea, because quite often it's a very small sticker on the corner somewhere saying you must be over 18 to play this machine. So they had also felt that as well. So it's maybe something around if young people right at this particular moment could freely walk in and out of establishments that are for over 18s, then we have a problem there. So we do.
Sorry, Chair, sorry to interrupt you. Yes, well, any responsible gaming arcade owner, particularly if they're members of NIACTA, will abide by a code around over 18s and have signage clear on the door as at the entrance and just inside. However, in the Code of Practice, and Kieran can talk about that later, the Code of Practice also has a section on age verification, and we're encouraging owners to use the Think 21 principle. And we have used, for verifying age, we've used the same list of ID that is used for liquor licensing. So I hope that answers your query there. But yes, I take on board your point. There is a massive issue around enforcement, and hopefully in phase 2 of the reforms, if we ever get to that stage, and if we ever have our own regulator or access to a regulator, that then we would be having our own enforcement officers, and that would lead to more robust management, if you like, of the legislation.
No, that's grand, thank you. Martina, anybody, any comment they want to make on clause 7, Paul?
Yeah, just on the point that Martina's just made, there's two aspects to this, I believe. So you'll get the young person entering the premises, and in most cases there'll be a split areas whereby there's gaming machines for all ages, and then there's the over 18 area. Now in some places there is like another room or a segregated part, so you're having to walk up an alleyway or through an archway. So there's nearly like an obvious barrier between everybody's machines and then adult machines, if you like. Sometimes even the lighting is different between those two areas, and so it's this preventative piece, I think, this warning. Now the government's all into nudge philosophies at this stage with regards to public health. So is there anything, and what we're doing with enforcing, what we're doing with applying law is we're putting the responsibility on the owners to police it in their own premises, which is correct. But in order to help those premises, because remember, an employee may well know these young people very well, and there may be a pressure there to allow. And sometimes it's the case whereby if the under 18 knows that they shouldn't be in a place, then there's that question mark and that pause before they enter. Should I be in there? Will I get told off? Yes, I will. It's blatantly obvious because there's yellow and black tape telling me or warning me not to enter. So whether, I'm not suggesting for a moment it should be in the face of a blue bill, but you know, for codes of practice, there should be something there to ensure that the young person knows full well that they should not be in that space, and whether that's signage on the machine, signage on a room, plaque on a wall, or whether it's warning tape around an archway, I do think it's something that we need to be looking at, because as we've seen over the last 2 years, that signage and that imagery to create nudge and prevent is very powerful.
Yep. Sorry, Chair. Yes, there is already in the legislation the requirement to have physical separation of machines for over 18s from those which are available to play for under 18s. So that is already in the law. And we also have through clause 9, is it, the new offence, or clause 7, is it, the new offence of inviting, causing or permitting an underage person to play machines. So hopefully with that as well, that will be an additional deterrent. And indeed in the code of practice, and again Kieran will talk you through that, we have suggested that signage should be A5 size, so that's like, you know, a small notebook size. It's a lot bigger than the wee tiny sticker. So we suggested that in the code of practice. And we also have, the department also produces a leaflet on gaming machines, and we will be reviewing all of our leaflets once the bill goes through, and we can certainly look at that as well, whether or not we can make that a little bit stronger in some areas. Thank you, Chair.
Could I just maybe add something to what Martina said? I mean, I take on board, Paul, your points, and it's something we can look at again in terms of the section of the codes dealing with protection of children and young people. But we're also saying on notices in the code of practice that the notices shouldn't just say no under 18s. They should make clear that causing or permitting an underage person to gamble, in the case of gaming, playing anything other than a lower limit gaming machine is an offence. So that there's clear knowledge there that people can see this is illegal.
Yeah, I think that's important.
All right.
Sorry, Chair. Just to add one final point, just occurs to me on staff training, and so NIACTA and Turf Guardians Association have told us, and I think they told yourselves as well, that they do frequently send their staff and various staff training about underage limit, but under how to recognise underage and how to discreetly handle that. Excuse me. So we do have a bit in the code as well covering staff training, but I accept the point that sometimes where it's somebody's mate, that it could be difficult for the staff member.
Okay, thanks, Martina. Can I bring Mark in, please?
Thanks, Chair. Kieran kind of stole my thunder there. I was going to make that suggestion around any advisory notices or warnings, that they don't just say what's not allowed, but they actually spell out the consequences of allowing it or permitting it as well. There was another more general point, not specifically related to this clause, but it was something Martina had said during this discussion, and it was expressing a hope that something might be done in the next mandate, in the next part of this legislation, and that's a couple of times. There's no criticism of the officials, though, but I think Martina's actual words used were, if we ever get to that stage. Now, that gives me great cause for concern, to be quite frank. I know you don't know what minister you'll have or what their intention will be around this, but a lot of the stuff that isn't in this bill, we were being told will be coming. Now it sounds more like we're being told might be coming. And like I've been open enough in terms of, say, clause 2 on the Sunday opening and clause 6 on the Sunday opening of bingo clubs. But I can see how those opposed to or concerned about those relaxations would be particularly concerned in the absence of a lot of the protections that now just might be coming in the second part of this legislation.
Yeah, Chair, I apologise for my poor choice of wording, and Minister is...
But it's accurate wording. We don't know.
I mean, I can't obviously preempt what an incoming minister or executive might do. So I suppose, being a long-standing civil servant, I'm used to getting kickbacks sometimes. So we have been waiting a long time to get this legislation, this bill even through. But Minister is clear and is on the record that she wants a two-phased approach. And the second phase will be a major piece of work which will bring us up to date, cover online and pick up all of those issues that members, the public and other stakeholders have repeatedly raised. And I suppose until something happens, I am a bit of a pessimist. So I'm always a glass half empty person. But all I can say is Minister is very clear she wants phase 2 to happen. But as always, we are subject to the view of an incoming minister and an incoming executive. And I apologise if I've been...
Don't apologise for being pessimistic. My name, Durkin, actually derives from the Gaelic word for pessimist.
I should change my name then to Durkin, because that's me.
Martina, this place does that to you, don't worry.
Mark, anything further? Oh, Mark's away. Sorry, don't bring Mark back in. Mark, anything further you want to add or comment?
No, that's fine, Chair, and that it's no criticism of the officials at all. I don't think they're being pessimistic, they're being realistic.
All right, Mark.
But then we have to be realistic as well.
Okay, Mark, thank you very much. Okay, any other member, anything further they want to say around clause 7? No, are we happy then that we move on then to clause 8? Okay, members, clause 8 and 11 and the schedule together, as our discussions to date have dealt with these together. So clause 8, arrangements not requiring persons to pay to participate. Clause 11, prize competitions not requiring persons to pay to contribute. And the schedule. At the meeting on Tuesday, the officials went through the responses to the committee queries to date. Our discussions on Tuesday centred on the two key issues of promotional prize draws and prize competitions, and the need for the bill to be clear that companies can include Northern Ireland residents in such draws and competitions. Officials advised us that the clarification of the wording of the clauses was not needed, as the information contained in Schedule 15A should make it clear what the law is. We accepted the official's explanation from a legal perspective, but queried whether further, simpler explanation could be put into the EFM. After the meeting on Tuesday, we wrote to the Department on the following issues. We requested written confirmation that the EFM will be amended to explain in layman's terms what clauses 8, 11 and Schedule 15A do to further remove any impediments to such competitions and draws being open to Northern Ireland customers. The EFM should also include clear examples and committee requested site of the amended EFM as soon as it is available. Martina, any comment on any of that?
Yes, Chair, the EFM with the amendments, track changes is on its way to you. And we hope that meets the requirements of the committee. Also, as I mentioned previously, we have a number of information leaflets, and all of them will have to be reviewed whenever the bill becomes law. But we have decided, taken on board what the committee has said. We have decided that we will draft an additional leaflet covering prize draws. So that will make it we would be a lot freer in that leaflet to set out examples, and we can even use, Halifax, Nationwide, and other bank and building societies. We can name them. So the leaflet would include worked examples, and we'll also give an example about prize crosswords, because that bank savings issue and crosswords are the two most complained about issues under this section. So I hope that provides some assurance to the committee.
Okay, thanks, Martina. Paul?
Yeah, sorry if I picked that up wrong, and maybe I missed the first bit there, Martina. But so I'm supportive of an additional leaflet, but that's not to negate my request with regards to the amendment to the EFM. Sure, it's not.
No, it's an addition. So we have amended the EFM, but I should stress that that's not the final version that you've got, because we did it at breakneck speed to get it through to you, and I've noticed a slight where we could maybe do it a little bit better. So we will do a further version and get it through to you then for Tuesday's meeting. But we're going to do what we can in the EFM, and we're going to do an additional leaflet then, which will be a lot more detailed than what the EFM can be.
I understand, and I support the leaflet. Just to let you know, we can't judge your wording because we haven't seen the new text for the EFM as yet.
I appreciate that, and I apologise you didn't get it through.
Yeah, Paul, it's on its way, just to say, it's on its way through to you, but what roughly you'll see in it is that we have put an additional sentence to the ends of the explanation on clauses 8 and 11, and then we have a separate section at the end on Schedule 15A, which tries to explain the intention behind Schedule 15A. And there's some very general examples in it, maybe not worked, but what we mean by, prize competitions such as, bank building society accounts, newspapers, those type of things are in it. So that's roughly, hopefully that will land with you today or tomorrow at the latest, but it's on its way.
Yeah, I don't mean for anyone to name companies or banks or building societies.
No.
But it should be clear that that's exactly what we're talking about, if that's in order.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Anybody else want to make comment on clauses 8 and 11 and then the schedule? No, nobody's raising a hand to say they want to make a comment on that. Okay, then members, we're going to move on then to clause 9, rules for society lotteries. At the meeting on Tuesday, the officials went through the responses to the committee queries to date. We noted that the department would forward the regulations concerning the uplift in the maximum prize limit as soon as available, and we wrote after the meeting requesting sight of draft regulations, or at least a written explanation of the detail by Monday at the latest in time for consideration at our meeting on the 25th of January. On Tuesday, a member queried if there were any issue regarding island-wide society lotteries. The official stated that there were no issues regarding anyone buying a ticket, but there could be a problem with such a lottery being promoted in Northern Ireland. Excuse me. We wrote requesting that the department provides a response on that query. Regarding ticket prices, officials advised that a new limit needs to be in the primary legislation, and confirmed they would confirmed that they would issue drafting instructions to OLC to proceed with an amendment. We requested sight of that draft amendment also by Monday. Martina, again, any further information on these?
Yes, Chair. So we confirmed that we will provide either a draft of the regulations or a written briefing of the detail to be covered in the regulations under separate cover by Monday. And just to say, the regulations are still very much in draft and haven't been cleared by DSO. On societies lotteries, on the transfrontier issue raised by Mark, we point to Article 1351, which states that subject to the provisions of the order, a society's lottery is not unlawful if it is promoted in Northern Ireland. The society is registered under Article 136 and it is promoted in accordance with an approved scheme. So what this actually means is that lotteries such as those promoted across the island by many sports clubs on an all-island basis are illegal unless the lottery is also registered with a district council here as required under Article 136. What type of organisation qualifies as a society? So we've set out the definition of a society there in Article 2.2, and we've also set out the definition of a society's lottery. So one of the other queries that we noted were outstanding from last week was, could a political party constitute a society? So what we're saying is that a political party may well satisfy the definition of society as set out in 2.2 of the order, but it would be for a court to give a definitive view. And I think it's maybe a couple of meetings ago, Kelly had asked, does an organisation have to be registered as a charity? So we confirm that no, the organisation doesn't have to be registered as a charity as long as it fits the definition of a society as stated in 2.2. And the lottery satisfies the definition of society's lottery set out in 2.2 as well. And then on ticket prices, we confirm that we have issued a set of instructions to OLC requesting an amendment to the maximum ticket price, and you will recall there was some debate about what that price should be. So Minister has set it at £100. Minister also identified a potential unintended consequence in relation to this issue, namely that some societies might seek to, for want of a better word, abuse the facility and run multiple draws at £100 per ticket, which would be more often than the policy intention of once or twice per annum. So whilst various organisations who spoke in support of removing the ticket price limit stated that the charities and societies know their audience and what is feasible or reasonable in respect of ticket price, Minister believes that it may be prudent to include a regulation making power within the bill which would give the department some flexibility to amend the rules for societies' lotteries. So what Minister intends to do is to take up power to amend Article 1374 of the 85 order, which would make it clear that the department could make regulations which could apply different frequencies according to the level of ticket price, and instructions to council have been issued to this effect. So those discussions with council are ongoing, but we expect to be in a position to provide a copy of the draft amendments hopefully on Monday. So just if you want, with your permission, Chair, I'll just kind of talk through what we mean about unintended consequence. So I think we know that a lot of clubs, for example, football clubs, run draws which run every month and people pay it off at £10 a month or whatever, which is perfectly acceptable under the new rules. But what we don't, those clubs also run a weekly lotto, which is £1 a week. And that would be because the current maximum ticket price is £1. So what we don't want is those clubs abandoning sort of the grunt work, if you like, of fundraising on a regular basis, and just opting to have maybe 5 or 6 draws per year where they sell the ticket at £100, and particularly in areas where some of these clubs are based, they're deprived areas, and people naturally want to support the club and have great affiliation with it, so that we don't want people to feel under pressure then to buy these tickets on a sort of weekly basis near enough. So that's why Minister would like to have that power to introduce some flexibility around the frequency and to maybe vary the price, but we're not sure if that is possible. We're still exploring that. So I hope that explains the position, Chair.
Thank you, Martina. Any member want to make a comment around this? Andy?
Yeah, Chair, it's just to ask Martina, would that regulation be affirmative resolution or negative?
Affirmative, yes, affirmative.
Thanks.
Paul?
Yeah, and in your deliberations about finding the unintended consequence, because it is a real one, and I recognise that as soon as you say it, are you minded in any shape or form as to how regular or frequent, these things should be? And I guess it's different in different areas for different populations, so I can see the difficulty there and probably why it's best to go enabling at this stage. But has the department any sort of detail on their thought processes around the frequency?
No, I think we're thinking that selling tickets at £100 a go would be the exception rather than the rule. But the regulation making power, we would obviously have to consult on the regulations, and then based on that, the views expressed, we would then take a view, our minister would take a view, the then minister, I should say, the incoming minister would take a view then on how often or whether or not indeed that we need to limit the frequency of that, or whether we need to vary. There is a power already in 1374 for us to vary the frequency of the draws, but we have never used that power. So, but we don't have the power to vary the price limit, the ticket price limit. So that's the bit that we need to further discussions with council whether or not that's possible, because we don't want people then, selling the ticket. Okay, if we say you can only sell twice a year at £100 or 4 times a year, that we don't want people going off then and selling the tickets at £99 and trying to get round the law that way. Yeah. But it's something that needs a bit more thought, which is why we think it would be more straightforward if that is done by regulation, and then obviously it would allow us to respond if there is issues identified in the future on a quicker basis rather than having to go through primary.
Yeah. So just on your existing power on 1374, it says the department may, by order subject to affirmative resolution, specify the maximum number of lotteries that may be promoted on behalf of the same society in a year, and the minimum number of days that must lapse between the dates of each lottery, of any 2 lotteries promoted on behalf of the same lottery. So that gives you the power at the present to sort out the frequency. Now tell me this, is that law for an individual case by case society, or is that a general power?
No, that would be a general power, but as I've said to you, we've never used it. That's been there. I think that was, I can't remember, it wasn't in 85, it might have been 96 it was changed, but obviously it was changed.
94, Martina, I think.
sorry, 94. So obviously it was changed in relation to some issue that ministers at that time had become aware of. So I don't know, it wouldn't, to answer your question, it would not be possible to legislate for and name specific organisations or anything like that, I don't think. But I mean, it could also be possible that we put it in the guidance. We have guidance leaflet on societies lotteries. Yeah. So maybe it is that that would be best served there, and that in conjunction with council we monitor how the rules are operating in practice, and then, you know, as I've said before, good practice would dictate that you evaluate your policy maybe 3 to 5 years after implementation. Yeah. So we're still, I mean, we're still trying to figure this out, because we're working at such speed at the minute.
Yeah, and you see, can I just say, I'm not sure what the L is, whether it's the price ticket at £100 or whether it's the fact that you have to buy that every so often. So would it be in your thinking, again, this is just a suggestion, I'm not holding you to this or not trying to trap you or anything like this, that you would have a sliding scale, because £100 is a limit, it's not a target. So
absolutely, you hit it there.
Yeah. So you know, but again, in some areas, £75 per ticket is still going to be an awful lot of money if you're paying that out on a weekly basis. So you know, you could work out some sort of. I suppose I'm looking for a logical way of going here that would be fair right across the board. And I suppose the only thing I can come up with my primitive thinking at this stage is a sliding scale, whereby the cost of the ticket prohibits you from doing so many a year. If you know what I mean.
Yes, I know what you mean, indeed. And also, we're trying to work it out ourselves, to try and work through different permutations, because there would be some, for want of a better word, natural controls that would prevent a society from running those tickets, not least the fact that people would soon get fed up buying every week £100 tickets, but also the limits that we're going to have in place around whole proceeds. So that in itself then might naturally give you a kind of cut-off, but we're still trying to work that through ourselves, whether or not that satisfies that sort of policy intention, I guess you would call it, that we don't want people to be bombarded with tickets at that price too often. But what the too often means, I think, needs further thought, and I think the only way we could bottom that out is by having some sort of consultation on a draft set of regulations at a future point.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, Paul, thank you. Anybody else? Any comments or queries around clause 9?
Can I just double check on this one? So if you have a club or society who has, say for instance, decides to do twice a year a competition where it's £100 for a ticket, that's within the scope. But what happens if that club or society engages an external body to run these type of events for them? So if there's a PR company comes in and they will run the event and the proceeds then go to, or a private company decides that their members or their workforce will be contributing in this way towards a group, is that still covered under this scope because it's the club or society that's the beneficiary?
Yes, it would be. There's rules, existing rules around lottery managers or lottery consultants. So yes, it would still the society still has to obey by the rules, regardless of whether or not they run it themselves or run it through a consultancy or fundraising firm.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Okay, no other member has indicated they want to say anything further in clause 9, so I'm going to move on to clause 10, which is qualifications by age, residence or corporate status for licences, certificates and permits. Members, no queries have been raised on this. Any comments at this stage on it? No? Okay. Then I'll move on to clause 12, which is cheating. At the meeting on Tuesday, the officials went through the responses to the committee queries. To date, no further queries have been raised on this issue. Again, members, any further queries on clause 12? Nope, nothing. I'm going to move then on to clause 13, enforceability of gambling contracts. We've raised no queries on this. Can I ask anything at this stage members want to raise in clause 13? Nope, nothing. I'm going to move then on to clause 14, industry levy. At the meeting on Tuesday, the officials went through the responses to the committee queries to date. Officials highlighted difficulties in getting cooperation from HMRC in gaining access to data regarding gambling expenditure, GGY, etc., and this matter would continue to be pushed by the Minister as a future regulator would need that type of data. Members highlighted concerns around 14.3D and being sure that transfers of the levy to other departments are spent appropriately. Officials stated that it would be something a regulator could consider in the future. Members queried if there was a way to set something in stone in the bill and give the example of the carrier bag levy. We wrote after the meeting on Tuesday requesting that the Department responds on how the use of the levy money could be more pinned down in this bill and if a change of wording to the gambling related harm would be included as suggested by officials. Also, the committee requires sight of the amendment as soon as possible, which expands the requirement to consult as proposed by the committee and accepted by the Minister. Again, Martina, anything further?
Okay, Chair, thanks. So we'd like, on the regulator data collection, but would like to clarify that any decision by an incumbent minister or executive to appoint a regulator would require primary legislation, and this is planned for as part of the Phase 2 reforms. So such legislation would include, as I outlined when we were talking about Clause 7, any proposals or policy proposals from other jurisdictions and take account of best practice internationally. It would be envisaged that if a regulator was to be appointed, that an entirely new and robust regulatory framework would be built around the role and remit of the regulator. We have considered whether or not it would be possible to add an enabling power into the existing order, but it isn't possible. So issues such as powers of investigation, for example, that would have to be fully explored and included within the primary legislation in the future. As I mentioned, I think earlier, that if we had a regulator equipped with all the necessary powers, similar to the powers that the Gambling Commission have, that regulator could require data, and all of that data would then be at its disposal, and we might not necessarily need the HMRC data. But on accessing HMRC data, we still think that we need to have discussions with them around some sort of data sharing, as the Assembly has no powers to compel them to give it to us. On levy proceeds, the Minister has accepted the committee's request to expand the list of consultees within clause 14, and instructions have issued to OLC, and we expect to be able to provide the committee with that revised amendment by Monday. On the point about how the use of the levy money could be more pinned down in this bill, and if a change of wording to gambling related harm should be included, after reviewing the section and leaving aside the point about pinning down the spending, the wording in new clause 172 to 4D is sufficiently broad, we feel, to meet the policy intention of using the proceeds to fund education, research and treatment. The department would clarify that the reference to perhaps changing the wording in this clause, and I meant specifically addiction to gambling, was in response to comments from some witnesses, but we consider, having reviewed the instructions to council and conversations that we've had around that both terms used in this clause, addiction to gambling and other forms of harm or exploitation associated with gambling, does, in our view, cover all forms of gambling harm, whether that be the individual suffering the harm, their family, or broader society. And a broader society would include, obviously, education and perhaps the criminal justice field, from potential crimes committed as a result of a gambling addiction. So we don't think any amendment is needed to that wording there in 4A, addiction to gambling. On the proposed regulations to be made in consultation or in connection with the levy, obviously I will reiterate again that those regulations would be fully consulted on, and the regulations in the new clause 172A3 refers to the regulations making provision for the amount of the levy, the payment and its general administration, and that regulations may in particular make such modifications necessary to give full effect. So what this means in practice is that the regulations could state that the department appoints an administrator, for example, an intermediary funding body, to administer the funding on its behalf. The difficulty, and just thinking back to the discussion that we had on Tuesday about spending and whether departments would spend the money appropriately, the difficulty with specifying a body, for example, just taking it as an example, the Public Health Agency, is that the varies of that agency wouldn't cover spending outside of its ambit. Therefore, the Public Health Agency couldn't provide funding to education projects, for example. So then, leading into the point about pinning down the spendings, we looked quickly, as Mark had suggested, at the wording in the single-use carrier bag charge regulations. And we couldn't find any reference in that. So we looked at the Parent Act, the Climate Change Act 2008, which is a UK-wide act. So it gives DERA the power to make the regulations, which it has, the Single-Use Carrier Bag Regulations 2013 as amended. So again, we couldn't find any legislative provisions around expenditure of the monies, but I emphasise it was a very quick look. But we do note that the power in the Climate Change Act includes provision for DERA to appoint an administrator, and we've given you an extract from the Schedule 6, Section 77 of the Climate Act. So, having considered this, we believe the provision included within Article 172A3 has the same effect as that set out in the Climate Change Act. So, if you look at the wording there, as I said, it refers to regulations may make regulations under paragraph 1 must make provision for the amount of its payment and general administration. So we think that achieves the same effect as that the member was alluding to. So the proposed amendment that Minister has accepted is in relation to the list of consultees proposed at new Article 172A6. We have asked Council to expand the list of consultees contained within Clause 16.6 of the Bill to include organisations representing health or social problems related to gambling harm, and any other relevant organisation as appears to the Department to represent the interest of those impacted by gambling harm. So we hope that this provides sufficient assurance to the committee that there will be consultation with relevant organisations and that any proceeds of the levy will be expended properly and for the benefit of those individuals who are suffering or at risk of suffering gambling-related harm. Finally, as explained on Tuesday, discussions will have to be held with DOF about the proposed levy, and normal practice dictates that the introduction of such a levy would include a business case, which would be placed on the department's website when it's approved. And this business case would set out all the details, including how the payments to be collected and how the proceeds, less any administrative charges, particularly if a third party is to be involved in administering the fund, will be treated and spent. We accept the point made about the need to ensure that the parameters of such provisions within primary legislation are sound enough, but we consider the clause as drafted meets the policy objectives of the ability to impose a levy, the proceeds of which will be used to fund education, treatment and research. That's us.
Okay, thank you for all of that detail, Martina. Members, any comment or anything further they want to ask around Clause 14 industry levy? No, we're okay?
So just
Sorry, go ahead.
just a wee quick one. So on 172A4 MB, you're content with that you're content with that wording, but do we need to then add your last three words there in your gambit there was about education,
Oh, yes.
health. So should we add that?
Addiction to gambling or addiction to gambling.
So 4A reads addiction to gambling, or B, and other forms of harm or exploitation associated with gambling. So within that, and we're talking about the proceeds of the levy, should there be an amendment there adding in about education? You named another two and I've lost them, but your last line, Martina, specified three things.
Yeah.
Education, health.
Education, treatment and research.
Right, those three.
Education, treatment and research.
So should there be an amendment in that adds those three aspects in?
We will discuss this again with Council, but at the time when we were drafting the instructions, that was the policy intention and that was the wording that Council came up with. And the feeling was that 4B covered education, treatment, research, but we will certainly go back to Council and ask the question. There's no issue with us doing that.
And give me those three again: education, research, and addiction. Treatment. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Martina. Anybody else? Anything further on Clause 14?
Chair, if I could just ask, when you talked about the administration fee, we know in the community and voluntary sector the normal is 15% of the cost. So I'm just wondering then, does that mean that 15% will be that level of admin that would be limited with any external body?
Sorry, do you mean 15% is the limit?
Well, in the community and voluntary sector, the agreement had been in the past that administration costs shouldn't be any more than 15%. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. We haven't done any thinking around that, Kelly. At this stage, that would all be part and parcel of the consultation when the regulations would be drafted and when we are going out to consultation. But if there is a convention that exists, particularly in the voluntary sector, that the administration cap, if you like, is 15%, and that's still valid when we're doing the regulations, then I would imagine we would impose that
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
limit.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, folks, I'm going to move on then to clause 15, which is code of practice. So, members, at the meeting on Tuesday, we highlighted concerns expressed by Drumbo Park and NIACTA. Officials went through the draft code of practice in more detail with the committee and highlighted the range of codes they had used to draw up the current draft. They confirmed that it was a 6-week focused consultation in the first instance, and after that a further consultation would be conducted on the final code of practice as per clause 15.10 of the bill. After the meeting, we wrote requesting confirmation that the range of issues where members expressed concern, including affordability checks, spending limits and self-exclusion, will be considered in further detail based on responses to the current and the next consultation. Martina, any further information yet on these?
Yes, Chair. So the department accepted that such concepts such as affordability checks contained within the draft code may need further development, but emphasised that it needed to hear the concerns of both the industry and other stakeholders in how any such proposal might work in practical terms before the Minister could come to any final decision. And the final decision is going to rest with an incoming Minister, we believe, in the new mandate, given the processes that we have to go through. So the department draws the committee's attention to the requirement in clause 16.3 of the bill, which requires the department to have in place a commencement order for this provision prior to issuing any code of practice in final form. And the department confirms that it will conduct a much longer consultation on a revised code of practice subject to the views of an incoming minister. And for the committee's information and sake of clarity, we have enclosed in the papers on their way to you a copy of the consultee list that we used to seek views on the draft code. So you will see that we included quite a broad range of stakeholders. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you, Martina. Paul?
So just to be clear, are you saying that 15 will be lifted out of 16.3?
No. 16.3 is the... No, we're saying that we, at the minute, we don't have a power to introduce a code of practice. So even if the... even when royal assent is given to the bill, we still don't have that power to issue a code of practice until such times as the power is commenced. So what we're saying is there's a process to go through.
So there's two steps. So
yeah.
So 15. If you commence 15 on a day that the Department of Communities may, by order, appoint, what you're really doing there is allowing for a code of practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Paul, we're more than allowing, because at that point, if you actually look at the terms of the bill, at that point the department must issue one or more codes of practice.
Yes.
That would be important, but at that point we're obliged to introduce at least one code of practice by law.
Yeah, you get that. Yeah, the department must issue one or more codes of practice under the manner in which facilities for gambling are provided. Mm-hmm. So with that must being there, does that mean, does that put a time scale on it once commencement? Well, I suppose the gift is yours to commence, so you wouldn't want to commence without you being in position to
issue at least one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Hence why we're doing all this now, Paul.
Yeah.
So that once we commence, we can issue. I mean, as I say, the codes as you see them, there are all a number of themes and sections like protection of children and young people, customer care, credit, and that type of thing. So we will have to issue at least one, and this is our present thinking on that at the moment, in terms of what you see as the draft.
Yeah, and there's no reason to suggest that every subsection in that code of that draft code of conduct or practice could be actually individual codes of
Yeah.
practice.
Yes, it's one or more codes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's why it's designed in the way it is. So there probably are things, to be honest, Paul, that we would feel, while we'll wait to hear what stakeholders say, there are certain elements of that we're probably fairly comfortable with, such as, you know, credit cards and stuff like that. There may be other elements that need more work. So we want to have ideally something ready, and that's why we feel it's very important to start the consultation process now and get drafts out.
Yeah. I think it's important to have that agility and flexibility. But in truth, what you could do is out of all of those subsections in that code of practice, you could just pick one and commence it and then do nothing on the rest of them. Now, I'm not saying you would do that, but that's in practice a reality.
Yes, it is, but I think in a lot of this, there are areas of that it's very clear we need to be able to regulate, and a lot of this code of practice also has to be seen as a tool for both other agencies and even in a sense for the industry as well, as to what is good practice. So we would expect that as that becomes more public, that there'll be more and more discussion and debate around what we should have in a code of practice, whether we should do this to deal with that aspect. Maybe something that comes out of the likes of your discussions, Chair, with children and young people. There are all those issues then start to bubble.
Can I ask then, can I flip that over the other way? So with your subsections at the minute, they are a list of things that you worry about or you're concerned about, and that's hence why they're in the code of practice. But there could be something that a new minister decides is important that's not currently in the draft. And whilst it may well be important that we do have codes of practice in that aspect, others may argue that no, why are you even going anywhere near that? You're interfering where you shouldn't be. What powers is there then to prevent the department from going down that road?
DCMS.
Well, I suppose ultimately it's a decision for the minister. The codes of practice themselves, Paul, are not actually a definitive statement of the law, which is important.
Yes.
They're more they're more, if you like, how we would interpret the intent of the law and the good practice within the law, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, but remember that these codes of conduct have teeth with regards to the impact, with regards to failure to comply with the provision of a code does not in itself make a person. So if a new minister just decided, let's use hyperbole. Let's say a new minister decided, I don't like this opera, I don't like bookies, I don't like, and the new minister comes up with some harebrained code of practice, which then could be really impactful when it comes to renewing licensing. Mm-hmm. So I suppose using hyperbole in that regard, is there anything there to protect?
Well, that is the purpose of consultation. The minister code of practice can't be brought in without consultation, and it specifies a large range of organisations that must be consulted in broad terms. And I think maybe it won't have hit your desks yet, but you'll see the kind of consultees that and stakeholders we're consulting with. So the big check is the consultation.
Yeah, but you see my problem. You see my concern, and it's probably a real one. Whenever so let's take for instance last weekend, whenever a code of practice was put out in draft and everybody went boogaloo. So these are powerful documents, even in draft form.
Well, yeah, to be fair, and maybe reiterate the point Martina's made, I mean, I understand that it's caused some anxiety for some people, and we don't want to cause anxiety. But at the moment, at least certainly since last night, since I looked, we've only heard so far from the industry. We haven't heard yet from other stakeholders. So there's a balance here we have to have in our consideration.
Yeah. But you, so let me use hyperbole again. So what's been cited to us by some of the industry is that could put our lights out.
Yes.
Someone said to me the weekend, this could put our lights out. So you imagine a minister in place who wants to put the lights out of the bookies. It could be, and I'm using hyperbole, but they could use a code of practice to do that.
Well, the code of practice has to work within the framework of the law, is what we would say. There is still a licensing regime. There are still things that are allowed and not allowed. So that would be broadly our position. There's no power, direct power for a minister to, in the legislation as we see it, to put the lights out. Though I think we can take that away and think about it, because what you're kind of getting at is, could they indirectly put the lights out through the code of practice?
Yeah. Just I'm worried now about safeguard for the future. Whenever you have the power, whenever the department has the power to publish or issue one or more codes of conduct. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Kelly?
I just wanted to ask, is there a way that the consultation for the codes of practice can actually be used to help us with the issue that we have with DCMS? So we know that if we wanted to limit advertising to protect under 18s and vulnerable people, and we talked before about scratch cards being available in the corner shop and that sort of thing, and the fact that Northern Ireland has no control into putting them behind screens, taking them out of the public view. Is there an option within the consultation that for Northern Ireland we can ask the questions about that? Should scratch cards or any betting paraphernalia be put the same as cigarettes, behind, sort of taken away from public view and limit on that advertising? Because then with that proof in advance of the white paper coming out, then we can use that to put pressure on DCMS if Northern Ireland chooses then to have those scratch cards removed from public view and to protect, vulnerable people and people under the 18.
Sorry. I think as far as we're concerned, but obviously we would, this, would need defined or cleared by legal, but we can't legislate for a reserved matter. So national lottery is reserved. I said that Minister had written in the past to DCMS about advertising in particular, along with other issues, and that we have a commitment from Chris Phillip, the gambling minister, that when the white paper is produced, that he will meet with Minister to discuss devolved issues.
Okay. But that's why I'm wondering, in this code of practice, can we not have a question in that to ascertain the public's view on this, not for us to regulate, but to provide as proof to DCMS?
That we might be able to do that in a consultation, but I'm not sure that how far that would get us in terms of, it's a reserved matter, therefore the final decision rests with them.
No,
but,
absolutely. I'm just trying to think of ways that we can provide the Northern Ireland evidence, of what the public in the co-production, co-design, Westminster doesn't really pay attention to that in Northern Ireland, but if for instance, we are concerned about those scratch cards, so if there's a way that we can proactively provide the evidence to DCMS, I was just wondering if that could be included in those types of consultations.
If we were to do it, Kelly, it might necessarily have to use the code anyway, but that's if we could do it. I think the scope of the codes, though, the codes are in line with, are meant to be read alongside the framework of our current legislation. And even you'll see on page 5, it's very explicit that the codes do not apply or have any bearing upon the operation of the National Lottery, which is separately regulated under the National Lottery Act 1993 and the Lottery Act 2006. So we're really working within the scope of the power we have. Now, whether we could maybe could look at that, whether we could look at that in another direction. I don't know. It hasn't occurred.
That's why I'm asking whether this could come into the code of practice on marketing for children and young people, because it's the advertising side of it. This is the only betting form that is front and centre at a till whenever you go and buy a newspaper, for those places that have the licences. It's not about stopping the lottery. It's about protecting people, and that's where I'm sort of coming from on that,
Yeah, I see.
Trying to get round the issue, I suppose.
No, but I mean, I think the concern is clearly there, and I think Martina, the Minister, has maybe written about advertising in general and sponsorship and so on, and again. To be honest, I don't have a straight answer for you myself, because it's not something I've thought.
Yeah, I just wondered if it was something, Chair, if we could check through to see if when the consultations are happening as part of that, the marketing section, in the codes of practice, that we could ask the public, is this something that you want us to address with DCMS? Is there a way to word that? But I'll leave that in the gift of your hands to check that.
Okay, sorry, Chair, with permission. Yes, we will certainly take that away, and as I've said, we need to do another consultation on a revised draft of the code before we get to the point of issuing the codes of practice, and just remind that the law changed in September there, I think it was, that it's now illegal for under 18s to buy scratch cards. And there are provisions in place where, particularly in small shops, where there may be 16-year-olds selling tickets, minding the till, that there has to be a responsible adult in place to kind of supervise, if you like, the sale. So there is a bit of protection there on that. But certainly we will take that away and we'll have a think about it and see if it's something that we could include. But where you've reminded me where we could have information on the public's views is within surveys, and I mentioned before that we are having discussions with colleagues in professional services unit around a range of potential questions that could be included in surveys. So excuse me, obviously prevalence is a big issue. And we know from our own prevalence survey that I think the figure was something like 49% of the people that gambled are buying a lottery ticket. And then I think our prevalence drills down further into that. But we talked about having the need to have good data collection going forward, which will inform policy making. So I think a big piece is around behaviour and attitudes. And I think in that piece of work, that once we would get the results of that survey, that could be used to as evidence to DCMS of the particular issue that we're having with scratch cards in particular. So I think that what you're saying, there is merit in it, and I think we have a way of doing it. It may not be within the code, but we certainly, it's in our thinking. We just haven't a definitive answer for you, if that helps.
To be honest, I think we're all on the same page and we're finding ways that we can access this information and then that can be presented. No, absolutely. I get where you're coming from, and that if there's another avenue to getting that rather than interfering with this code, which would take it out of scope for Northern Ireland, then no, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, no one else has indicated that they want to ask anything further on clause 15. No, okay. I'm going to move on then to clause 16, short title and commencement. The committee considered this commencement clause very briefly on Tuesday and no queries were raised. Let me just see where I am here. I'm on the wrong page. So I am. It was just to say then, because we did look at this very quickly, and I know that we touched on clause 15 and commencement around clause 15. Just then, can I ask around clause 7, 12 and 14, is that also all come into operation on a day appointed by the department also?
Yes, so we need to do commencement orders for those sections.
Okay, all right. Members, anything further? No. Nope, nothing? All right, okay. Right, I think that's us finished there then, Martina and Kieran. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
We're going into closed session, as you know now, so thank you.
No, so
Okay, you
thank
don't need
Rena.
us to hang around or anything?
I don't actually know, I don't think so, but yeah, we'll play it by ear. Sure, we can contact you if we need you back in.
Give me a shout,
Give you
yeah.
yeah, that do?
Yeah.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you so
All
much.
right,
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Okay, members, with your permission then, we're going to go into closed session to discuss further with Claire McCanny from the Bills Office. So if we can bring Claire in and then we'll go into closed session. All right, members.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29.
On it previously when we discussed this, to take forward with the department. They've announced how they're going to support those on low incomes and then Social Security, but they haven't said about anything about those individuals who are not in receipt of Social Security, and there are many people right across Northern Ireland who will not fall into the criteria of either the emergency fuel payment or the payment support scheme that there's no support for. So I think the department need to detail what and how they're going to support those people.
Yeah,
You mean double funding has been mentioned a few times, and there are people that will receive double funding, and there'll be then many who will receive absolutely nothing who are in need. Mark, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, well, it was on that, and I would concur with all the points made by my colleagues so far, but it was in that double funding issue, and then against the fact that so many households who are on the breadline but above the threshold just won't get any help at all. But then when you look at this payment being based or being individual based rather than household based, there are homes that they're going to get like £1,000 and there's other houses going to get nothing. So it's hard, a bitter pill to swallow for many of those in that situation.
Yeah, it's something similar to what happened last year as well, with a heating payment that was individual based and not home based, Kelly.
Chair, we talk about this now. In 2 days, if there's something announced, it just goes to show how much we're being kept in the dark on this one. But others have said it's absolutely right. I'm being inundated at the minute with pensioners who cannot and will not get, because they're not on pension credit. They don't get the £200 winter fuel payment. And some of them are really struggling mental health wise. It's got to that stage where we all know as constituency MLAs, when somebody starts to talk very seriously about their life, you have to involve other services. But it's very hard, I think, for those people. As Mark has said, there would be households who could potentially get up as far as £1,000 mark or even more, based on the fact that it's per individual. And there are others in society who, just because they're over the threshold of the income, that's it, they're out. But they may only be £1 over that threshold.
Especially when you think of pensioners who have a small works pension, and that knocks them out.
That we were all encouraged to get.
Yeah.
I think there's an argument to be made, Chair. Is this necessarily the payment support scheme? And whilst I'm not opposed to it, is it necessarily the best vehicle to deliver the support as needed? And obviously I appreciate that we have limited time to get that 55 million out the door, but I would argue probably there might have been better and more targeted ways to get it out to those most in need. But
Look, we are where we are at the moment. We can ask some of those questions, especially around the tax credit, and if that can be pursued further, because I think that would help out so many families and individuals. Paul, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, Chair, you'll know particularly more than anyone else, my passion is energy. And I've found these discussions and queries that we're raising as a committee nothing but a dump squid. And it's not anything wrong with this committee. It's the attitude of the department, the way they've treated us, the contempt they've treated us, keeping us in the dark, being piecemeal with their policies. Now, I get this is hard, but the fact is this: people die every year because of energy and the lack of support. Winter excess deaths is a big thing, and nobody talks about it appropriately. And the department, I think, again, knowing this is an annual thing, but knowing it's much more severe this year because of the geopolitical mess that we're in with regards to Russia, China and availability of gas. This is a massive issue, and nobody in Northern Ireland departments, I don't care who they are or what department they're in, is capable of fixing this to prevent excess deaths. And that's one thing that we really need to get a grip of. And I think if it's one thing for a legacy report from this committee, is that there should be a fundamental review of how we assess need around energy and how to prevent excess deaths in the winter. People die of cold every single year, and it's very rarely mentioned.
And I think that plays in, Paul, too, to the piece that I'd mentioned at the beginning here about the housing executive budget going forward. And we know that many of those houses that are going to receive these heating payments are so poorly insulated, and that I don't know how we're ever going to afford to bring those houses up to a standard where actually they're going to only have to pay minimal on their heating costs, instead of heating costs that are astronomical because of poor insulation within their homes. So it should be all joined up, and there should be a strategy there to take people out of that fuel poverty.
Because you and I were involved in negotiations around a programme for government. I think, Kelly, you were in the room too. Energy is massive, but it also impacts on housing.
Yep.
And then the lack of energy impacts on education, on welfare, on health. And we yet can't have the ability in this country to produce a programme for government that meets the needs of our people. It is an absolute disgrace.
it's back to the points as well, Chair, and I've been calling for some time, and I'm grateful to the support from the committee previously when we wrote to the Minister about a fuel poverty task force, because that emphasises on the point that Paul's making. It cuts across every department, and a fuel poverty task force, whilst it won't resolve all the problems, it will bring all the key stakeholders in a focused manner into the room to bring forward short, medium and long-term solutions. And areas such as these schemes are being brought forward, then those stakeholders are at the coalface could say, no, that's not going to work in practice because of this and this, and they can provide useful support to the department.
I know. Look, members, I'm conscious of time, and I think we've given that a fair enough airing. It's just then, on the back of that, before I move on to agenda item 6, so if we agree then to pursue the issue around the tax credits, because I think that is something that definitely we're missing out on there. There has to be a way around that. Kelly?
I was just going to suggest, Chair, with the tax credits, I would be asking a question. Obviously, we have the limit on income that cuts off a number of people, but is there a bracket that the department could come back to, so that above that limit?
But there is no limit on the second grant. The second grant is only
no.
based on the limit is on the first grant. The second grant is only based on within certain benefits.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, for those pensioners who are not on pension credit, who may well then be considered being out because their income is of a certain limit for other benefits, is there something we can do for a barrier for those people who could be in an income bracket? Because, you know, being resource rich but cash poor means that you can't afford to heat your house that maybe you own. So
Is it maybe attendance allowance? I know that's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
But then you're back to the argument. If you were to include attendance allowance, then you have a strong argument to say disability, living allowance, and personal independence payments on that basis. I think the issue with our tax credits is that you can argue there's a correlation with universal credit, because that's now the one model for delivery of tax credits. So that's where I'm coming from, the correlation with UC and tax credits. But I get what you're saying. You know, we need to look, but that's back to that piece about that cohort of people who have been missed out.
Yeah, and I think it was for a swift, for them to swiftly execute the second payment. Then was by using the data they already had, so it wasn't an application type.
Yes.
So they were then it was so they could get it done swiftly, and I think that's the reason behind that. But I do think there's more questions on that as well. Look, members, can we move on? I'm just conscious of time here, and that will bring us nicely and then to our next agenda item 6, which is Bryson Charitable Group briefing on the energy fuel payment.
Can I just to clarify, it's not an interest per se, but I met with Bryson last Friday on this, so I just want to members are aware.
Not a problem, no bother, Andy, thank you for that. So can I then invite into the meeting then Shane, Logan, Joe Marley and Rachel Wan? Let's see who have we got. There we are. The 3 of you are there. You are very welcome to the meeting today. Thank you for, it was very swift and you coming back to come in and brief us, and we're glad that you're here. And I'm sure you've been listening there or been able to listen to some of our conversations before we brought you in. So it's an issue that we're all very interested in. It's an issue we're all very concerned in to do with. So look, can I just pass over, is it yourself, Shane? Are you going to brief the committee and then we'll follow it up with some questions?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can indeed.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you for including us in the last minutes of your conversation, because this is a massive, massive issue. There are around 300,000 people in Northern Ireland in fuel poverty, and obviously the emergency fuel payment scheme can only cater with around 20,000. So we are outnumbered 15 to 1 before we start. But in that 300,000 number or the 20,000 number, we need to understand we're talking about individual trauma, individual poverty, people right on the edge. And I just want to take it back to individuals, because 3 of those we've dealt with during the pandemic are systematic of what's going on. We came across 2 brothers who were so poor, not just fuel poverty poor, but every other way, that they could only go out one at a time, 2 17-year-olds, because they only had 1 pair of shoes between them. We found a child entering a diabetic coma because the family couldn't afford a fridge in which to keep the insulin and keep it regulated at the right temperature. And when we went to one house recently, we found a pensioner, recently widowed, bereft, with 3 candles on his kitchen table for his heat and his light. And we, out of our own funds, were able to help them. We were able to provide a lot more aid than just fuel poverty, because a lot of the stuff was mental as well, mental health. So these people at the most extreme are the people we serve and the people we represent. Generally, as a charity, Bryson goes below the radar and just gets on with the work. We're over 100 years old. We help over 50,000 people a year, 300,000 also households through recycling, and we've just over 1,000 staff. We introduced social work into Ireland, indoor bathrooms into the Northern Ireland. We were the first charity in Ireland to deal with prisoners and their families, to recognise their rights and their need to have their lives turned around. And we were the first people to bring free legal aid in to families, individuals who couldn't afford it. So being in the front line is what we do. During the pandemic, over 90% of our staff were deemed to be key workers. And what we found, because we were in the streets, in the roads, in the countryside, we found that when many people went into lockdown, the services that were provided to them, their connection to normal life had been almost completely cut off. We took a decision at that point to spend about $500,000 of our own money, our own reserves, putting us into loss to try and help people. And in the first phase, the first 6 months or so, we helped over 5,000 people with emotional support, with food, with energy and other support. Out of that came the Warm Well Connected programme, which was this time last year, which was the precursor of this programme, and in that we were able to reach 8,000. And obviously in this new phase, with energy prices roughly doubling, the thing has become very much more acute. So let me narrow down, if I may, to this scheme. We are on schedule, and we're paying out to just over 300 people a day. Interestingly, and I know some of the criticism has come around being online versus phone. The scheme last year worked on phone, and in the equivalent period, the first nearly 2 weeks, the phone system was only able to process about 1/10 of what we're currently processing. So we're working at a processing rate at the start of the programme of 10 times what we were able to do this time last year. Listen, there is definitely learning. If we had our lives to live again, the single biggest thing would be to get the 55 million scheme announced before the 2 million. It was almost done the wrong way round if you had the opportunity to do it again, because it meant that you had 55 million at least of funding being sought for a pot that was only 2 million big. Other learning is that perhaps some of the early messaging between us should have been better, that it was very restricted as an emergency pot, that it was only for people below 23,000, that it was only for people who had either run out or were about to run out. And similarly, we have now put in place a safety valve of paper copies. We probably could have done that at the start, so there has definitely been learning. But what I would say is that well over 2,000 people have now got emergency funding. We know from some of those people that actually this was life or death, that they were out of fuel, that they were very ill, that they were in dire circumstances. We know that in many cases it was a question of life or death or severe health. But we also know that no matter how good a job we did, and we actually think we've done a very good job, and it hurts the criticism because we serve those people, but no matter how good a job at an excess of demand over supply, 15 times odd, no matter how good a job we did, or in fact can do going forward, it's never going to be enough. And it actually raises, and I was glad to hear it in your debate, the much bigger question here isn't how well do we provide emergency support. The much bigger debate here is how do we stop fuel poverty? How do we stop poverty? How do we work to turn areas and lives around through education, through health, through employment, through family support, through training people in the most difficult, deprived areas, which are also the areas of greatest potential, training community leaders, training young people, training individuals to have a much more positive, potential exploiting outlook on life. And as we enter into the climate crisis and therefore the need to invest sums that have never been invested before, we want those sums that are going to deliver the carbon neutrality to be invested into those areas of greatest need, where the housing stock is at its poorest, for those who can least afford energy, that the insulation, that the quality of the housing, the quality of the heating systems is such that the fuel bills are radically reduced, but also we're driving employment, we're driving positive activity to spark the individuals in the areas to maximise their potential. We exist to bring, as Bryson, the greatest difference into the greatest need, and we want joined upness with yourselves as MLAs, with the executive. We want UK government. We want all parts, communities, we want the private sector to try and drive goodness and investment into those areas to tackle the poverty problem, the opportunity problem at root source. And it's going to take a number of years, but we need this collective joined upness to tackle where the need is greatest. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much, Shane, and certainly we're not here to lay criticism at your feet either. We know that you're very much a long and established charitable group that has done lots of good work over the years, and I've got feedback. Can you put yourself on, hold on, we're going to put you on silent while I'm speaking and then we'll take you off again, so just bear with me. So we're not here to do that, and actually the sheer fact that when criticism was being lobbed your direction on the media and various outlets, you were on there defending your position, which I think is excellent. I think you're not even defending, we're on there putting your point of view across. And you had no difficulty in coming in front of our committee this week. It wasn't an issue at all. You were keen to do it. So, and we're keen to have you here because as a scrutiny committee, we also say we're here to assist the minister and the department, but we're also here to assist the likes of yourselves as well, because we want to get to the bottom of some of the issues that have been raised through our constituency offices and other avenues. So I'm glad that you were able to come here today. For many, feel that you've been thrown under the bus a little bit. So you have with this whole scheme. I think you're absolutely right in what you were saying, that the second scheme that was announced should have been announced before the scheme that you were asked to front. I think you're absolutely right there. And I think that has caused problems from the very beginning. You'll know as a constituency officer, and I know you had the conversation with Andy as well, as a constituency MLA prior to this meeting, that we were inundated. Those first, I suppose, especially the first few days, especially because people were just so frustrated. You can understand as well as we can why they were frustrated in just the process that they were having to go through. So I just want to, I suppose, ask you first of all, do you feel that you got the necessary assistance that you required from the department in the first instance? And then follow on from that then as well is then, do you feel that you then have done enough when it comes to the likes of our MLA offices, our advice centres, places like that, in enabling them? I mean, I have been told now that there is an email address that MLAs can use. Has that been sent out to all MLAs? Are all MLA offices aware of this? And I know also from your paper and also from information that I have received that we now people can apply in written format, because we all know, and you would know this yourself as a charitable group, that an online format was never going to suit absolutely everybody, albeit it is the quickest way of going through that information, but it was never going to suit everyone. So just to start off with those few questions, and I'll ask Antoinette to bring you back in again on speaker. Okay, you're back again.
So, thank you very much. I think you raised several questions and I'll do my best to answer them. We actually find the department very good to deal with, moving quickly in difficult circumstances, responsive, flexible. And one of the good things that's happened here that hasn't happened in my experience is where we have department, consumer council, energy companies, ourselves and others trying to join together, albeit it's just a first step. to try and address this emergency form, we need to keep doing that and bring others in to address the structural causes. In terms of you being bombarded as MLAs, yes, you have, and so we 29,000 hits on the first day, which indicates the severity of the problem. So it's like a food bank where people are starving, and if you have food for 20,000 people that has to be spread over 3 months, and you're 300 looking for it, no matter how excellently you do it, it is never, ever going to be enough, and it's something analogous to that. That said, the paper copies have been issued to all MLAs, to the key partners in the community, to try and provide some sort of a safety valve. But unfortunately, just as we are being hit with demand 15 times supply, unfortunately, you're going to be hit in exactly the same way, and as is the community. So, yes, I think we've improved it a bit, and that's good learning for us. But at the same time, there is going to be, unfortunately, enormous pressure, enormous frustration. What you maybe don't recognise as well is that energy poverty is a big part, a massive part of what we do, and we've been doing it for years. We did it very intensively, more well connected last year with 8,000. We did it with our own money. We're continuing to try and bring in charitable funds. We've been quite successful. We'll be going through some more programmes imminently on fuel poverty money from outside Northern Ireland, other charitable monies. A lot of our work is done in people's houses, and even through this scheme, we have had our own staff out visiting people in their houses. When it becomes clear they can't cope online, when it becomes clear nobody's representing them. But what we're doing there is our absolute best. I have a team of 10, 12 people in this building working incredibly hard to process this. I have people on the ground out, people making phone calls, following up, but actually, no matter how brilliantly we do, it just isn't going to be enough, and we are going to take flack. But we talk about having the 2 million before the 55 million rather than the other way around. It would have been brilliant if it had been able to be organised, the 55 million, then the 2. But it was still right to go live on the 2 because we've been able to get emergency aid out and will be able to get emergency aid out at the rate of 300 odd a day before that money becomes available. So it certainly would have made our lives a lot easier to do it that way around. But we were still right to do it the tough way and take the flak, but at least get aid out. So I hope that makes sense.
No, Shane, look, that's grand. Just then on the issue to do, as I'd mentioned to you, for various schemes we have had dedicated MLA helplines, dedicated MLA email addresses. For various schemes that have been put out, certainly throughout COVID, that was the case. And very much as MLAs and MPs, it would be as well. We don't share those numbers, we don't share those addresses, we keep them very much to ourselves, and we use them, we only use them as a last resort in most cases, in most offices, because most offices are more than able to deal with the vast amount of queries that come in. So just to ask you around that, has that been set up? Is that now available? Are members aware of that? And then just to ask you, before I open it up, and I'll ask members to indicate if they want to ask anything, then we I know certainly through my own office, people who have tried to apply have gotten so far with their application form and then have to start again the very next day at the very beginning again because all the information is lost, or they've been deemed as ineligible because of some reason or other, albeit they are eligible for it, but whether that is the information they've provided or whatever that might be. Can you give us some examples of why someone would have been deemed eligible or why they've been turned down, in order to help us as MLAs whenever we do speak to our constituents and say, well, okay, you need to do that differently, or that is not what they're asking for, it needs to be something else, because they're the questions. If people do come to their MLA's offices and use us frequently, we're private messaged in Facebook umpteen times a day, and quite a lot of it are around these very issues. So just if you could answer some of those questions as well before I open up to members.
I'll try, Chair, and I'll probably ask my colleagues to help me here, because I'm not necessarily the master of the detail. So we are paying out roughly 300, a bit more than 300 a day. Roughly, we're having to go through 600 a day to get the 300. And that's because a little under half are ineligible. The biggest source of ineligibility is people not providing the clear, simple answers. On that, if people can provide the information, that would be brilliant. We are also then working through those and going back to people, and there's a rate at which we can go back and try to clear that up. So we are trying to clear a backlog where people haven't provided the necessary information. I think if it's okay, I'll ask my colleagues to make comments on any of the detail there. That would be.
Shane, thank you. And I thank the committee again for the opportunity to discuss the scheme. I mean, I think on a daily basis we are considering how the scheme is functioning. Excuse me, because it's obviously our passion to get this help out to as many people as efficiently as we can. We do that. The scheme itself is, the system itself is set up, and it does close when we have met our daily limit, and we do appreciate that if you're just about to complete your form, that can be frustrating. And the avenue then is to reapply. Now, and we have people who have successfully done that. I think in terms of the eligibility or lack thereof, again, because we are considering this scheme each day, we have adjusted communications at the front end of the scheme on the information page, reinforcing the fact that it is really, really important that the evidence that's required is completed accurately with a clear picture, a very clear picture of, say, if you're applying for gas, of the gas meter number, something that obviously in the photograph does that, plus show the units, because things like that could actually then push it out of the system again if it's not clear, and we can make the decision. The second thing would be in terms of, again, if you're looking for to use bank statements to evidence economic eligibility, that we can clearly see the name on the bank statement, because sometimes we get bank statements that show numbers but don't actually show names or addresses on that. So we're trying to make that clear now, actually, and we have adjusted information, and I would say that in more recent years that has become less of a problem, and that people are actually giving us what we need to process the application. We really do, and we would ask you, as you're talking to your constituents, to say, please, would you make sure that we can clearly see from photographic evidence the name and the address. That makes life so much more simple. We're also getting information sometimes where the eligibility is clear, but the detail of, say, meter numbers, etc., isn't so clear, and we're having to make phone calls back to applicants to clarify that. So again, if you could stress that it's really good if people could just double check the information that we're given, because we have had electricity companies, we've had gas companies coming back and saying, no, that number is not correct. So, but having said all that, I think that we are seeing that a range of people from different age categories have been able to successfully complete these forms, and we are processing a large number and a growing larger number of eligible applicants each day.
It's clearly improving. the 55 million has taken a big bit of pressure off. We have been more, perhaps clearer on the criteria. The applicants are getting better at giving us the required criteria. There are three main groupings of people who are applying to us. The first is the lone parent. The second would be the working poor, people are earning money but they're well under the 23,000. And the third would be pensioners. So it's roughly a third, and we're not seeing any one category struggling more than any other. So listen, people are getting better, we're getting better, it's calming down a lot, but no matter how brilliantly we all do it between us, demand is still massively in excess of the ability of £2 million to supply.
And just to add, in relation to your question about the dedicated email, there is an email that's been disseminated to the MLAs and MPs to be able to contact us as well.
Okay, look, thank you. Some people are looking at me and saying I haven't received that. But can I just ask you after this? Can we mute there again? Sorry, Antoinette. Can I just ask you after this meeting if you could then send that dedicated email address through either to our committee clerk, who will send it to the committee members, and then we'll disseminate that through our own parties and stuff like that. Because I think that would be really, really useful for our offices, and I promise you we won't hound you, because we'll try and work it out ourselves as best we can, as we always do. But that, I just think, will make your job a lot easier if you have, you know, an MLA who, I know when it came to the shop local cards, by the end of that, the MLAs were actually vouching for the people because they knew them, you know, and they for many of the people that are coming into your office, we deal with them on a day and daily basis, whether it's food vouchers, whether it's their benefits, whether it's something else. So we do actually tend to know our constituents very well. So that would be really, really useful. And I absolutely understand, and I get the need to double check and triple check, because sadly in our society we have people out there that will try and defraud the system as well. And you know, there's only so much money in the pot, and I know that you want to make sure that it's absolutely going to those that are most in need. So I fully understand why you need to check everything to the nth degree. Sean, did you want to come back there just before I bring in? I've got Andy and then I've got Kelly. But Sean, did you want to come back there first?
Yeah, yes, please, Chair. It's a lot of people seem to think that this scheme was like the £100 retail scheme, was like you get your vaccination, it's eligible to everybody. And in the early days, people weren't listening. Emergency, people weren't listening. It's £100. So we were inundated at the start with big numbers of people who just thought it was part of the general COVID provision. Now, again, thankfully, that's tailed off a lot, but people were treating it a bit like that, the £100 retail voucher scheme, which obviously it isn't. Sorry.
No, look, thank you. I'm going to open up here to the floor, so I'm going to ask Andy first and then Kelly.
Yeah, Chair, I'll be quick. Apart from I can hear myself.
Can you mute them again, Antoinette? Sorry. There we are.
Thanks, Chair. I'll be quick because I do appreciate, obviously, I've already met with Shane, Rachel and Joe, and good to see you again. In terms of the flexibility of the application portal, is there any further update on that? We discussed about the availability of that in the afternoon and maybe early evening for those who can't access it at 9 AM. Also, in relation to, there's the ability to make one award, one successful award. Are you currently, I imagine you're currently assessing how many people come back in order to determine the scale of the need out there, which leads me into my third point. I don't normally like asking the questions rolled into one, but I appreciate we're under pressure. What conversations are you having with the department post March 2022 when this scheme closes? Because we're all very aware that the need and the impact is not going to disappear overnight. Indeed, the pressure, the cost of living pressure that many households are facing is going to continue for some time. So there's going to be a need for continued intervention from government and wider agencies such as yourselves. So if there's any more detail on that.
Yes, indeed, Andy, we can say that we are just about to, so we have created a timetable so that the availability of the online forum will vary in a very transparent way. We will communicate that clearly as to on which days the forum will be open, but we do take the point that there is a need for access to this forum at various times of day in case people are out at work. In the morning, obviously, people are leaving children to school, etc. So that timetable is just being agreed, and we've certainly agreed that with the department, and that will be published. Probably not this week, Thursday, not this week, but for the week beginning Monday of next week. In relation to extending, I mean, as Shane said, we have a very positive and open access to the department and the officials who are looking after this scheme from their offices. And as I say, every day we are considering how this scheme can reach those most in need in the best way and the fastest way possible. So we have been able to increase the number of applications we're taking. In fact, we've almost doubled them. So yesterday, day before, we were taking 600 over and above the target had been set at that 333. So as we find the eligibility grows within the growing number we're able to take, then obviously the spend gets under pressure. So we are talking to the department about looking at how that might be serviced going forward. It's a conversation. There's clearly no decisions about that at the moment.
Okay, and go ahead. Sorry. So the only other point I was going to pick up on was the one award. Are you continuing to monitor that? How many applicants are coming back unaware that they can only get one award? Just so we can see, the need and the scale of the need out there. We know that it's huge, but that might give us a degree of an indication.
Yes, we were able to see if people have applied again through duplicates, so we've got systems in place to be able to record that. And as you say, it means that we're aware if there is a need where people have got £100 and there's still something else there. So it's something that we're aware of and that we're looking into, but we do have a system in place to keep an eye on duplicate applications as well.
Thanks.
Okay, over to Kelly's next.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Shane, Joe and Rachel. I have to say I have not envied your job over the last number of weeks. And do you know what? I'm going to apologise if nobody else has apologised to you. That energy payment support scheme, if that had come out first, it would have made your job so much easier. We've also spoken to officials. The names of all of these schemes are so similar, it's getting me confused, never mind the public out there. If it was no "you're about to be cut off" fund, would have been easier for people to understand. I know I had multiple phone calls and emails, and as the Chair has said, Facebook messages, Twitter messages from people saying, "But I get PIP, why am I not getting this?" And I had to say, no. This is about if you have no recourse to any other funds and you are about to be cut off on whatever fuel source that you have, this is the one that you can apply to. Can I ask you then, to be honest, you're playing a blinder on this. I just wish that we hadn't made your lives so difficult as a government. But can I ask, since that energy payment support scheme has come in, have you noticed a difference in the pressure on your applications or the number of applications coming through?
Yes and no. The guys will have exact numbers. So when it started, day one, 29,000. It's now maybe a quarter-ish. It's certainly well down, but it's still very, very significant. And to kind of put that also in context, we've been really doing 330 a day. It was happening that when we opened up at 9, we were having to close in a few minutes It's now taking 20 minutes, which is better, but it's still demand massively exceeding supply. So yes, it's less, but it's still massive.
Okay. When you've said there about, sorry, when you've said there about, you know, it takes 20 minutes and that's sort of the amount reached. When someone gets through to the form, how long do they then have? It's not 20 minutes, obviously, because that's the access to the form. How long do they then have to complete that form before it times out?
It doesn't actually time out. There is the frustration that if we hit our limit and the system closes. But generally, in terms of you have as much time as you want, and in fact, the more important thing is to make sure that you've taken the time to put the accurate information in. The background analytics that I understand from our IT guy is that it actually is such a simple form that it has taken people somewhere between 3.5 to 5.5 minutes to complete. So it is, I mean, it was designed as a really kind of simple form for people, so people have mastered it really, really quickly.
Can I just check then, when someone then has filled out their information, so they've gone and got the evidence, you know, attached that through, when they hit submit and the form's disabled, is that because in that time while they've been filling out the form, the others have got in front of them and it's closed off the system?
That's exactly right, Kelly, and you know, we have, as I said, we've increased the number that we're receiving to optimise the number of eligible applicants. So even with increasing that yesterday and the day before to 600, we still met our capacity within 25 minutes. Yeah. So it's like.
I'm just wondering, just for accessibility purposes, are you considering taking a look at that? Because I'm thinking about someone like my dad, who he won't be applying because thank goodness we've got him all sorted out, but he's 76 actually, he'll kill me for that one. And he's big fingers, and to be honest, if he was filling out the form, it would take him half an hour to even get past his name and address. I'm just wondering, is there anything that you're thinking about that way, and is that where the hard copy, you know, people phoned through would be if somebody's going to take a while or is not very good with internet, should they then go for the phone line and the hard copy?
So I think that the hard copy is a bit of a safety valve, but I think you're right. I think there's something we need to look at ourselves here about getting it done in time, or timing out, or the risk of it timing out. So I think we have an action here to maybe look at this. So I think we have an action there, Kelly.
Okay, that's brilliant.
Can I just come in on that quickly?
Sorry, yes.
Joe, you recall we discussed this when we met, and we discussed about an IT workaround to this, similar to like what the Education Authority had with the pre and primary school applications, where it's a weighted access point. It's not ideal that people are obviously first come, first serve, but it's to avoid that process where somebody hits submit and it's disabled, and then, you know, the likelihood is they'll probably not go back, even though they're in huge demand or in huge need. They'll probably not go back the next day to fill out the form because they become so disillusioned with the process.
This is an entirely fair challenge, and it's a wee bit like, I remember when you went on to get your COVID vaccination certificate, you get nearly the full way there, and then flip, you were gone. So listen, I think we need to look at that and see if we can do something there. I think it's a very fair challenge.
My final question is about, right, so we know you guys are working away on the emergency fuel payment scheme. Thank you very much. We know that the energy payment support scheme will make automatic payments of £200. So what happens when those payments start to roll out? So someone is very close to getting cut off, but they get this £200. Now, the Minister did say in the Chamber that effectively someone could get 2 payments, but I'm sort of assuming that, say it's February or it's March, whenever this payment comes in, if that's on their bank account and they have this, they're out of the system then. They would have to have spent their 200.
Yeah, I think that's right, Kelly. I think when people actually begin to receive the support, and that's why I guess the emergency fund was was so important in that kind of interim period. But certainly that will happen. Plus the fact that we did find in the Warm Well Connected scheme last year that once people began to get that, that is actually when the demand began to drop naturally anyway. So people, people were grateful for the £200 last year. It was the COVID fund last year, and the demand for the emergency did decrease. So I think yes, we'll obviously see it in people's bank accounts, and secondly, I think the demand naturally reduces.
No. I sort of was expecting that could help, with alleviate the pressures. My concern is that we know that the 200 from the Energy Payment Support Scheme is individual based as opposed to household based. So you could have a household who could get 200, another one who could get 1,000, another one could get 400. The person who applies for the Emergency Fuel Payment Scheme, maybe somebody who got their £200, spent it, and has no recourse to funds, and the heating is just about to go in the house, but you don't collect evidence of anybody else in the house and what their finances are like. Sure you don't? No, yeah.
No, we do.
Sorry.
Oh, was that you do or you don't? Sorry.
We do.
Oh, you do?
We do.
Okay. And so then it's, do you ask for bank statements for anybody who's in the house?
We ask for information on how many other adults and children would be in the house. There's brackets of age of people living in the house, and the bank statement would be of the application themselves.
Okay. I just wondered on that one, because unless they declare that person's in the house, I suppose. Okay. To be honest, guys, you have been through hell in a handbasket, and I can understand, because years ago when I worked in the community and voluntary sector, I did a road safety grant and it broke my heart, and I didn't have the technology stuff that you had, but no, fair play to you, you're putting that out there. It is a frustrating system at the minute, but I think it's frustrating because people thought this was their only bite of the cherry, and it caused those problems. I just wish that we knew about it as well as you knew about it, the Energy Payment Support Scheme, before yours went live. But no, thank you very much for the work that you're doing.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Right, I have got Mark Durkin, Ciara Ferguson and Stephen Dunn all waiting to come in, and we've got very, very maximum about 12 minutes left here. So can I ask you to just be as oh, Mark, you've put your hand down. Will you put it up again if you want in? Because you were next on the list. Yeah, he has. Can we bring in then? We bring in Mark, then Ciara, then Stephen, if he still wants in. Mark, go ahead.
I won't. Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the team from Bryson for coming in. I regret I had to cancel or postpone my meeting due with you yesterday due to a change in Assembly business. I'm not going to repeat all the questions or concerns or even constructive suggestions that my colleagues in committee have made there, all of which I agree with, but I will repeat the apology part from Kelly. Well, it's not apology, it's more sympathy to yourselves for having found yourselves in a situation that was, I suppose, unveiled or announced on the 29th of December by the Minister as the Ministers, but as soon as the scheme opened and you encountered difficulty, it was very much a Bryson scheme. Again, just I suppose to thank you again for coming in today and wish you well on this scheme, commend you on, I suppose, recognising the issues with it and undertaking to adapt to address those concerns and make sure that this help gets to those that need it.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. No question there, but thank you, Mark, for those comments. Can I bring Ciara in, please? Ciara, you're in silent.
I'm not going to prolong. Obviously, here, stay here. Just that, obviously, I very fully much understand the team and the work of the team. Obviously, working previously under the Warm Well Connected in my previous job, and back in January, I managed the team. One of and I commend the work that you have done to date, and obviously over the 2,000 plus families that have benefited from them, which is great. One of the things, and obviously from my own experience as well, and obviously the team that's actually working, it's really tough for them, because obviously they're working with and supporting those families most in need. So one of the key questions with regards to the after support, because obviously the cases that you are going through, some are quite extreme. We have a lot of vulnerable people. What type of support I'm assuming you are connected to a range of organisations in all of our local council areas, and connecting to provide follow-up support to individuals in cases that you are finding that are going through this scheme.
Thank you, and you're absolutely right. So, in this scheme and on the other work we do, we will identify people who need significant follow-up help. Often we can give that follow-up help directly ourselves. We do it by, at times, direct finance, by emotional support, by helping people run their families, through education, through training. There's a wide range of things we do ourselves. And then with other partners, we would refer them on, particularly those who would be at high risk and in acute need, if it's beyond us to do that. So that does actually almost take us full circle back to the need, rather than across the patch to be providing the emergency stuff. We need to get our retaliation in first and stop these things going wrong in the first place. Yeah. And that to my mind is the bigger challenge, and the more important work that we need to get into is changing the trajectory. Yes, by way of emergency, additional support. Yes, absolutely, by ourselves or other agencies. But it's the systematic stopping of poverty is the real challenge for us as a charity, and I would suggest that for society as a whole.
Thank you.
Okay, Ciara, thank you. Can I then bring in Stephen, please?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, and thanks, folks, for the presentation there, and the detailed and all the work that you've carried out in a difficult time. Just supposed to echo some of the comments that were made previously. To echo the frustration of applicants, particularly around the limit, and by 9:25 a.m. At that peak period where there was real frustration with people when the site was closed, the site was down. Just I picked up your point, Shane, there about the longer term outlook, and I think that is very important to keep the focus on that. But I appreciate this is very much a short term, I suppose, emergency in name as well. So appreciate the work that you're doing, and the hard copies is a good step forward. Perhaps that could have been, an option from the beginning of the scheme, might have eased some of the pressures. Just one question, I suppose. Did you ever feel that the minister, as well as outsourcing the process, as well, that she outsourced responsibility on delivering this scheme? Obviously, when there was problems came, the fact that DFC was a key funder, a statement in the department said it's an operational matter for Bryson. Have you any thoughts on that?
It's very hard for them to answer.
I think that it's not popular to say it, but we've actually found the department very good to work with. The department themselves have finite resources, and we would all love to be sitting here with being able to put tens, hundreds of millions into this. We believe we need to be sitting here, department, yourselves, everybody, industry, putting billions in to sort out fuel poverty. Listen, I would say there's learnings for the department, there's learnings for us, but in general, given the pretty tight time available, the fact that we've been able to help well over 2,000 families who were in dire straits is a pretty good effort.
Okay, and just apologies if I didn't catch it earlier on, just in terms of where we are then, obviously your focus was to sort of help 20,000 households. When do you envisage the March deadline? When do you envisage that you will be, complete?
The scheme is to go until the end of March at an average of 330 odd a day. We're on target to do that, but if there were additional funding, we would have the ability to ramp up pretty quickly. But as it stands, it'll go go to the end of March. And it deliberately is cast that way to try and catch those people in a consistent way through the winter.
Yeah.
But we would have the ability to ramp up, certainly.
Yeah, and just final question, what sort of time are applications filling up most days? This week, for example?
Very good point. Originally it was a few minutes. It's now 20 past, 9:30. To take Andy's point, we're now going to, from next week, be offering different time slots. The paper will provide a safety valve. But it's just because we're outnumbered in 300,000 fuel property, it's 15 to 1.
Yeah, no, appreciate that, yeah.
Unless we had 15 times the amount of money, we would never ever be able to do keep open full time.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Chair, and thanks, folks.
Okay, look, no one else has indicated they want to ask anything further, so can I just have a big thank you to Shane and your team there for coming in and briefing us this morning. We really do appreciate it, because as I said to you earlier, we're here to help you as well, and we want to help you in any way we can. And I hope you didn't take any criticism from any of us. If there was any, it wasn't intended. We know you're doing an extremely difficult job under great pressure, and just wish you well as that continues. So thank you for your time with us today. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, members, could I just suggest then that we asked for a departmental briefing then on energy issues? Yeah. If we can get that out to them today, and hopefully we'll get them in next week. Yeah. Yes?
Yes, please.
Good, okay. I'm going to then, any other actions from that anybody else wants? We're happy enough with that at the moment. Go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, sure. Just to ask that, I know that I've raised this and the Minister's going to come back about where the departmental easements came from this, but they asked if there's any consideration with the department of upscaling the budget, because obviously, as you said, the programme could be scaled up. So are the department looking to see if there's any further easements or money that they're not using that can be reprofiled to this?
Okay, now we can ask that question as well. All right, folks, are you happy enough then that we move on? Just conscious of time. I keep looking at the clock at the bottom of the room, which is like an hour and a half slow. But anyway, I'll move on then to agenda item 7, which is our correspondence. You'll find the correspondence memo at page 467. I want to draw your attention to pages 469, a letter from the Executive Office Committee in relation to SL1 transfer of functions appeal services order Northern Ireland 2021. As this proposed statutory rule impacts on the work of the Department for Communities, the Executive Office Committee would like to know whether the committee is content with the proposed rule. So are we content that that rule be made?
Content.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. I'll then move on and draw your attention to page 512, which is a request to brief the committee on the role of mainstream participatory budgeting in COVID-19 recovery and transformation. Are members happy enough to receive a briefing at a future committee meeting?
Chair, I was just going to say it's really unfortunate the timing of this, because the budget's going to be done by the time we'll hear from these people. So I don't know whether this is something that actually may need to go to the future committee, because we're already getting our budget now. You know, the participatory process needs to have taken place before that.
Okay, I mean, it's up to yourselves. We can put that down then in the report, or do we, we can get a briefing from them to see what it's about and just inform members. It's up to yourselves. We will have time to start getting some briefings once we finish our bills, so we want to be able to have a look at the vast and varied stuff that we haven't been able to do.
Maybe at that stage, yeah.
Yeah, will we? Yeah, we'll look at it, okay. All right, members, then can I then bring you on to page, no, is that it? Us done there?
Yeah.
Janice? I've got myself lost now. No, just then to ask yourselves, is there anything under correspondence that anybody wants to bring up? Happy enough with the correspondence memo? Okay. Yeah. Then I'm going to move to agenda item 8, which is the forward work programme. Members, at the meetings on Tuesday and Thursday of next week, we will be finalising deliberations on the betting, gambling, lotteries and amusements amendment bill, doing a formal clause by clause and considering the draft report. So we have a busy week ahead of us next week. I'm going to move then to agenda item 9, which is any other business. Do members have any other business they wish to highlight at this stage? Paul?
Yeah, can I bring up the issue around the media coverage of the Minister's public utterances around the Platinum Year and Her Majesty's celebrations. This is unique. We'll never ever experience or live through a year like this again. And no matter whether you're Royalist or Republican or Protestant Catholic, Unionist or Nationalist, it is a defining moment in history. And I'm very disappointed in the Minister's public utterances by the fact that she says that she has basically dismissed putting in any sort of support package to celebrate. These are, if you know, I can think back throughout my life where we've had street parties and we've had community gatherings, and you don't forget things like that, even at a young age. And I think the Minister is missing an absolute trick here, because we're all defined by history, and whether you celebrate or commemorate, what you should do is be respectful. And if we really want to live in a community for all, the Minister of the Communities should be a minister for all. And it's quite clear that in this case she has failed, and failed miserably. And I think she needs to reevaluate that, and I think that she needs to take into account people's views on this with regards to and have an historical lens to her thinking on this. It doesn't matter where you come from, what your beliefs are, what your constitutional political beliefs are. This is a defining moment in history, and people should be allowed to commemorate or celebrate or have the capability and the facility to draw down funding in order to have community-based supports and facilities in commemorating that. And I think there's a complete failure here. I really do, and I missed the opportunity. I could go further, Chair, but I won't, because I'll leave it there, because it should be celebrations for everyone. Thank you.
Okay, Paul. Stephen, when Stephen, is it on the same issue or a different issue?
Yes, just very briefly, just to echo those comments, Chair, if I can, just to reiterate my disappointment at this lack of action from the Minister, and as Paul has said, on this momentous occasion. I think it is an opportunity missed, and it is very, very regrettable that the Minister has taken this decision, and perhaps I would propose that the committee could write to the Minister expressing her disappointment on this.
Okay, well, if that's a proposal, I mean, I'm happy enough. It's up to members whether that proposal is. Kelly?
I was just going to say, I'm happy enough for a letter to go from the committee forward. Perhaps we could ask in that letter for a copy of the policy within the department for celebrations and commemorations, just so we can be clear.
I know the Minister at question time had said that she'd made money available for a festivals grant through the local councils. So it'd be interesting actually to see what that money does get spent on within each of the local councils. That's maybe another thing that we can ask. Also, anybody else want to come in on this subject at all? Are we happy then that we write then to the Minister? Okay. All right. Is there any other business members want to highlight? This stage? No? All right, I'm looking around, because normally Andy or Mark come in at the very end when I'm just about to push the button to the day, but so nothing forward. Oh, here he goes.
Too soon. It's too early.
Okay, members, I'm going to move on then to agenda item 10, which is date, time and location of our next meeting. Our next meeting will take place next Tuesday, the 25th of January 2022 at 9 a.m. in room 30. Thank you all for attendance today.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29.